legendary wizard stands between a village and a monstrous threat. This is the tale of the Hogwarts founders, a story of how four powerful individuals built the most magical school in history. By the end, you will know the true story behind the castle's creation, including the secret conflict that nearly tore it all apart. Where are you listening from right now, and what is the local time where you are? I always find it wonderful to picture us sharing this story from different corners of the world, long before the moving staircases or the enchanted ceiling. One man's act of courage sparked an impossible dream. Godric Gryffindor raised his sword not for glory, but to shield the helpless from a fearsome magical beast. That single choice revealed a core truth about him, a value that would one day define an entire house. It also set him on a collision course with three other extraordinary witches and wizards. Together, they would attempt to create a sanctuary for all magical children, a place hidden from a world that often feared them. But such a grand vision demanded immense power and unshakable unity. What personal sacrifice would you be willing to make to protect something you truly believed in? While Godric fought monsters in the open, another kind of hero worked her magic in the quiet of the earth. Helga Hufflepuff's power was not in a sword, but in the soil. She saw families, magical folk, displaced by fear and suspicion, struggling to find their next meal, so she took a barren plot of land and poured her unique magic into it. With a whisper to the seeds and a gentle touch to the ground, she grew an enchanted orchard. The trees bent with fruit that never seemed to run out, and the vegetables in the patches below grew back the moment they were picked. It was a miracle of endless, nourishing food, a direct answer to the pangs of hunger. This act of profound kindness created a beacon. Word traveled quickly of a place where a magical family could find a warm meal and a safe place to rest. More and more people came, their hope rekindled by Helga's generosity. But such a visible miracle could not stay hidden for long. The local non-magical community, the Muggles, began to take notice. They saw a land that had once been empty, now bursting with an impossible harvest, a sight that stirred not wonder, but fear and suspicion in their hearts. Whispers of witchcraft began to circulate. Helga now faced a terrible choice. Her heart was open to all, and she believed deeply in helping anyone in need. Yet the safety of the families who depended on her was paramount. The very generosity that defined her was now putting everyone at risk. This internal conflict weighed heavily on her, a constant tension between her ideals and the harsh reality of the world. Ultimately, the role of protector won. With a heavy heart, she cast powerful concealment charms over her beautiful orchard, hiding its magical bounty from outside view. It was a necessary deception, but it felt like a small betrayal of her open-handed principles. This decision marked a turning point. Providing temporary aid was no longer enough. The need for a permanent sanctuary, a place forever hidden from prying eyes and fear, became critically apparent. Her mission had escalated from offering a meal to securing a future. This deep, growing need for a true and lasting home was a feeling shared by another solitary figure, a brilliant witch whose own search for knowledge had left her profoundly isolated. Far from the fertile fields Helga tended, in a tower shrouded in mist, Rowena Ravenclaw achieved a feat of magic few could even comprehend. She held in her hands a delicate silver diadem, an object now pulsating with an impossible enchantment. It was not a crown for a queen, but a vessel for wisdom itself, designed to enhance the intellect and creativity of the one who wore it. This was her masterpiece, a testament to a lifetime of solitary study and unparalleled brilliance. The diadem's power was real and profound, a clear sign that magical knowledge could be elevated to breathtaking new heights. Yet, in the profound silence that followed her success, a deep loneliness settled around her. She had no one to share this triumph with, no equal to understand the magnitude of what she had done. Her creation proved that immense knowledge could be acquired alone, but it also revealed a painful truth, that wisdom itself feels hollow without others to challenge and refine it. Rowena found herself torn between two loves, her deep affection for the quiet pursuit of learning, and this new, aching realization that the most brilliant ideas only truly come alive when they are tested in the fires of shared debate and discovery. She looked at the diadem, this tool for personal enhancement, and saw a greater purpose. It should not be a treasure locked away in a tower, but a symbol, an inspiration for a place where the best minds could gather. Her decision was momentous. She would seek out other great magical thinkers, not to impress them, but to build with them. Her personal quest for knowledge transformed into a grand vision for a collective repository of learning, a library of living minds. This was no longer just about one witch's brilliance. It was about laying a cornerstone for an institution where wisdom could be a shared inheritance. As Rowena contemplated collaboration, a master of a very different, ancient magic was confronting a perilous threat. While Rowena envisioned a library of living minds, Salazar Slytherin faced a library of a different kind, the ancient and deadly knowledge of monstrous creatures. A basilisk, a serpent of immense power, had been awakened from its dark slumber and was rampaging through the countryside. Its gaze meant instant death, and its venom could corrode stone. Armies of wizards fell back in terror, their spells useless against such a primordial threat. But Salazar did not raise a wand in combat. Instead, he stepped forward alone, and he spoke. The hisses that escaped his lips were not random sounds, but the ancient and feared language of Parseltongue, a rare gift he possessed. He did not fight the beast, he commanded it. With words of power and sheer force of will, he soothed the basilisk's rage and bent it to his command, single-handedly averting a catastrophe that had stumped every other witch and wizard. The aftermath was a mixture of awe and deep-seated fear. The community was saved, but they now looked upon Salazar with a new wariness. His power was undeniable, yet it was also alien and unsettling. For Salazar, this victory was not just a heroic act. It was a confirmation of everything he believed. He had succeeded where others had failed precisely because of his unique, self-reliant strength. He saw a magical world filled with constant dangers, from creatures like the basilisk to the ever-present suspicion of the non-magical population, the Muggles. In his eyes, survival was not guaranteed. It was earned through prowess and purity of power. This belief curdled into a deep-seated conflict within him, a tension between his pride in pure blood magical lineage and a growing frustration with those he saw as weak, whether they were Muggles or even magical folk who lacked the necessary resolve. This internal struggle led to a momentous decision. He agreed that a sanctuary for young witches and wizards was needed, but his vision for it was starkly different from the others. He believed this school must be exclusive, a guarded fortress that would only take in students from purely magical families, those he deemed worthy and strong enough to uphold their kind. The curriculum would not just teach magic, it would forge students into formidable wizards, ready to defend their world with any means necessary. This philosophy was the first seed of discord, planted firmly into the fertile ground of their shared dream. His ideal of a protected, pure-blood citadel stood in direct opposition to Helga's open-hearted generosity and Godric's chivalrous protection of the helpless. The very foundation of their collaboration was now cracking under the weight of these competing ideologies. It was this very clash of ideals that would soon force a fateful confrontation. A powerful enchantment pulled them from their separate paths, each arriving at a misty Scottish glen under the same midnight sky. No words were needed at first. They simply stood, four pillars of magical power, feeling the land itself hum with potential beneath their feet. Godric, Helga, Rowena, and Salazar had all been guided here by the same compelling vision, a shared dream of a sanctuary that now felt tantalizingly close. They recognized in each other not rivals, but the missing pieces of a grand design. Godric's strength, Helga's nurturing magic, Rowena's boundless intellect, and Salazar's formidable command of ancient arts. These were the ingredients for a miracle. Yet the alliance was fragile from its first breath. As they discussed who this school would serve, their core beliefs clashed openly. Godric spoke passionately of opening their doors to any child showing magical talent, no matter their parentage. Every magical soul deserved a shield, he argued, a chance to be brave. Salazar's response was cold and sharp. He called that view dangerously naive. A sanctuary must be a fortress, he insisted, admitting only those from pure magical lineages to ensure their safety and preserve their power. To let in others was to invite the very suspicion and weakness they sought to escape. Helga, her heart aching at the exclusion, tried to bridge the gap, speaking of the value found in every loyal and hard-working individual. Even Rowena, who valued merit above all, found herself caught between the ideal of an open forum for the brightest minds and the practical need for security. The dream itself was the only thing powerful enough to quiet the argument. The vision of a school, a true home for magic, was a force greater than their disagreements. With immense resolve, they made a pivotal choice. They would set their differences aside for now and pool their extraordinary talents. Each would contribute their unique magic to the common goal. It was a gamble of historic proportions, a wager that their shared purpose could outweigh their conflicting philosophies. The personal stakes were almost unbearable. Failure would not just be a disappointment. It would mean the collapse of a dream held by four of the most powerful individuals of the age, shattering the hope for magical generations to come. With this tentative alliance forged, the monumental task of raising their sanctuary from the earth began. The very stones of the Scottish Highlands seemed to shudder as their combined wills focused on a single point. Godric's voice boomed with protective charms, weaving an invisible shield around the perimeter. Helga's hands moved over the earth, coaxing granite and limestone to rise and reshape themselves into walls and archways. Rowena traced glowing runes into the foundation stones, each symbol a promise of knowledge and enduring strength. And from Salazar came a deep, resonant magic, ancient wards that sank into the ground like roots, binding the structure to the land itself. The first great walls of Hogwarts began to climb towards the sky, a breathtaking testament to what their unity could achieve. Yet the land fought back. It was as if the earth itself challenged their audacity, the ground trembling and the stones groaning under the strain of the enchantment. This was not a brief feat of magic, but a marathon of will, a continuous outpouring of power that drained them hour by hour, day by day. The immense effort frayed their tempers, turning minor disagreements into sharp conflicts. Every architectural choice became a debate over their core philosophies. Godric argued for grand, open entrances and high towers, symbols of a brave and welcoming heart. Salazar countered with designs for hidden passages, subterranean chambers, and formidable barriers, his vision of a fortress clashing with Godric's open gates. Even Helga's desire for cozy, sunlit common rooms near the kitchens felt at odds with Rowena's plans for a secluded, soaring library tower. The dream was physically manifesting, and in doing so, it was magnifying the very differences they had tried to set aside. The solution, when it came, was a necessary compromise, an architectural reflection of their fragile alliance. They agreed the castle would present a unified, majestic exterior to the world, a single stronghold. But inside, it would branch into 4 distinct sections, each imbued with the magic and values of its creator. This decision saved the project. It allowed each founder to leave their personal mark, a permanent testament to their beliefs, while still upholding the collective whole. As the last stone of the outer wall settled into place, the reality of what they had built settled upon them with immense weight. The castle was no longer just a dream, it was a physical promise. Its empty corridors and silent halls were a vessel waiting to be filled. The potential for failure was now a chillingly tangible prospect, a ghost that would haunt these very stones if they could not agree on how to bring their school to life. The skeleton of the castle was complete, a silent challenge against the sky. But a building of stone and magic is not a home. The next great task awaited, one that would require not just power, but pedagogy, not just wards, but wisdom. They had to decide what to teach, and more importantly, who would be worthy of learning within these walls. The Great Hall was Helga Hufflepuff's masterpiece. Her magic did not carve stone or raise walls, but instead reached upward, weaving an enchantment of breathtaking beauty into the very air above them. With a final whispered incantation, the solid ceiling overhead dissolved, replaced by a perfect, living mirror of the sky outside. Whether it was a blanket of twinkling stars or a soft, gray drizzle, the ceiling reflected it all, bringing the vastness of the world into the heart of their home. This was not a mere illusion, it was a spell of profound comfort, designed to make every student, no matter how far from home, feel connected to the familiar turn of the heavens. The hall instantly became the soul of the castle, a space intended for shared meals, collective celebrations, and the simple, daily unity of sitting together under one sky. Salazar Slytherin watched this achievement with a simmering disapproval. He did not see wonder, he saw a glaring tactical error. Such a vast open chamber, he argued, was indefensible. Its enchantments were for comfort, not concealment or protection. He pressed for the common rooms to be deeply segregated, hidden behind complex puzzles and formidable barriers, ensuring that each house could be sealed off as a separate fortress if danger ever breached their walls. His criticism cast a shadow over Helga's triumph, turning a moment of celebration into a tense council. The debate was no longer about abstract ideals. It was about the very floor plans they were walking on. In that moment, Godric and Rowena stood firmly with Helga. Godric saw the hall as a training ground for bravery, a place to learn courage in the open, not through hiding. Rowena, though she valued secluded study, recognized that the most brilliant ideas often spark from casual conversation across a table. Together, they affirmed that the Great Hall would remain a shared space for all. This decision was a significant victory for their original, unified dream, a cornerstone laid not just with magic, but with collective will. For Salazar, however, it was a profound defeat that cemented his growing isolation. He saw their choice not as unity, but as willful blindness to the threats he was certain awaited them. Now every corridor, every staircase, every hidden alcove became a new front in their quiet war. The soul of the school was being shaped before their eyes, and each choice felt monumental. With the castle's physical structure taking form, its sheer scale and complexity began to present a new kind of problem. How could they possibly oversee such a vast and magical place, with its shifting stairs and secret chambers? This practical challenge demanded an ingenious solution, one that would lead Rowena Ravenclaw to her next great innovation. The empty classrooms and silent common rooms of Hogwarts posed a new and urgent question. How would they decide which young witch or wizard belonged where? The debate over selection threatened to reopen every old wound. Godric argued for a test of courage, a duel or a daring feat. Helga believed a simple conversation, an assessment of character and loyalty, would reveal all they needed to know. Salazar insisted the only true measure was a demonstration of pure magical lineage and powerful ambition. Rowena, listening to the discord, saw a problem that could not be solved by debate, but only by transcendent magic. She proposed they create a single, impartial judge, an artifact imbued with all of their wisdom, capable of looking past a child's nerves and into their deepest potential. It was a radical solution, one that demanded an incredible act of trust from all of them. The object they chose was simple, a weathered leather hat once belonging to Godric himself. The enchantment they wove together, however, was anything but. Each founder poured a fragment of their own consciousness into the hat, along with the core values that defined their vision for magic. They gave it their collective intelligence, their shared memories, and their most fiercely held beliefs. In doing so, they made their differences permanent and unchangeable. The ideals they had sometimes softened for the sake of unity were now etched into the hat's very essence. The moment the last thread of magic was woven, the hat twitched. Then it spoke. It was not one voice, but a chorus of four, blended into a single, wise, and strangely ancient personality. The Sorting Hat was born, a sentient magical object with one solemn duty: to see the true self within a child and place them in the house that would become their magical family. This agreement was the ultimate compromise, but it was also a profound gamble. They had not resolved their conflict. They had simply built a vessel to contain it. By creating the hat, They ensured that their four competing philosophies would shape the school long after they were gone. The future character of every generation of witches and wizards would now be decided by this enchanted judge, a permanent reminder of the founders' fragile alliance. With a method for choosing students finally settled, the castle itself seemed to stir, its empty halls awaiting the laughter, the fears, and the magical potential of its very first class. A hushed awe fell over the first students as they stepped into the great hall, their small faces tilted upward to the enchanted ceiling. They were a motley group, some in fine robes, others in patched hand-me-down clothes, all united by the magical spark within them. The four founders stood together on a dais, a united front, but their hearts beat to different rhythms. Godric's booming voice welcomed them all with equal warmth, his hand resting encouragingly on the shoulder of a trembling boy who had just days ago believed he was entirely alone in the world. Then the sorting hat was placed upon a stool, and its brim tore open to sing its very first song, a melody woven from four distinct magical philosophies. As the sorting began, a palpable tension threaded through the air. With each name called, the hat deliberated, peering into the deepest potentials of these children. A girl from a long line of magical diplomats was placed in Slytherin, and Salazar gave a rare, approving nod. But then a boy, bright-eyed and fiercely brave, the son of a blacksmith with no magical heritage, was called to Gryffindor's table to thunderous applause. Salazar's face tightened, his hands clenching within the sleeves of his robes. He watched, his dissatisfaction curdling into something darker, as more students from non-magical families were welcomed into Helga's and Rowena's houses. To him, each cheer from the other tables was a validation of his deepest fears, a dilution of the fortress he had helped build. Godric, sensing the frost emanating from his old friend, made a point of moving among the students, his laughter a direct counter to the brooding silence. He knelt to speak with a young witch in Hufflepuff, assuring her that her loyalty was as powerful as any spell, a clear demonstration of the inclusive world he fought for. The school was finally alive, buzzing with the raw, untamed energy of youth. But this life was the very thing that tested their dream. Lessons devised by Rowena sometimes left students baffled, while Godric's practical dueling exercises occasionally ended in minor injuries that required Helga's swift healing touch. The castle itself seemed to be learning alongside them, a staircase shifting at an inopportune moment, leaving a group of first years stranded and in tears until a founder could guide them down. Every day was a new lesson in patience and pedagogy, a constant reminder that building a school was one thing, but building witches and wizards was another. The future of their entire world was now present in these echoing corridors, its shape being molded by every spell successfully cast, every friendship forged, and every slight perceived. A single harsh word from a founder could shatter a child's confidence, while a moment of kindness could ignite a lifetime of brilliance. The stakes could not have been higher, and the weight of this responsibility settled heavily on all of them, but most heavily on Salazar, who saw not potential, but peril in every unfamiliar face. The daily life of the school began to take shape, revealing both its wonders and its inherent challenges. The morning mist still clung to the cobblestones as Godric Door led his small group of students toward the edge of the forbidden forest. He did not carry a wand, but the gleaming sword at his hip caught the first rays of sunlight. Today's lesson, he explained, was not about memorizing incantations from a dusty tome, but about learning to listen with your entire being. The forest was not just a collection of trees. It was a living, breathing entity filled with ancient magic. Their task was to enter with respect, to observe the creatures within, and to understand the line between bravery and recklessness. He demonstrated a defensive stance, the silver blade held not as a weapon of attack, but as a shield, a focal point for concentration and control. The students, wide-eyed and clutching their wands a little too tightly, followed him into the dappled shadows. For those children, the lesson was transformative. They learned to identify a bowtruckle's nest by the subtle shimmer in the bark, and to calm an agitated hippogriff by meeting its gaze without flinching. They discovered that courage was not the absence of fear, but the will to move forward in spite of it, with a deep respect for the power they faced. Back in the castle, however, the news of the excursion was met with starkly different reactions. Helga Hufflepuff, who had spent the morning teaching herbology in the safety of the greenhouses, felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. She imagined a student stumbling, a creature misunderstanding a gesture, the myriad ways a lesson in courage could turn to tragedy in a heartbeat. Rowena Ravenclaw, while appreciating the value of practical application, questioned the pedagogical structure. Could the same principles not be taught through controlled simulations, through detailed study of bestiary texts first? Risking young lives for the sake of a lesson seemed an illogical and emotional gamble. Salazar Slytherin's disapproval was the most vocal and pointed. He confronted Godric in the corridor, his voice low and sharp. This was not education, he argued, it was theatrical recklessness. True strength, he insisted, was built through disciplined study of the most powerful magics, through mastering control in a secure environment, not by chasing thrill in the woods. A true fortress for their kind would not send its children into the jaws of danger. It would make them so formidable that danger would not dare approach. Godric stood firm, his arms crossed over his broad chest. A classroom can teach you how to hold a wand, he countered, but it cannot teach you what to do when your hand is shaking. True courage is forged in the moment, facing the unknown. To shelter them completely is to leave them defenseless when true peril arrives. This was the very heart of the chivalric code he lived by, and it would define the adventurous spirit of his house for centuries to come. But his unwavering belief did not mend the fracture, it deepened it. The philosophical disagreement was no longer an abstract debate. It was now a matter of tangible student safety, raising the emotional stakes for everyone. Each founder saw the future of magic reflected in their teaching methods, and Godric's forest walks seemed to Salazar like a direct path to ruin. Meanwhile, in the deepest, most silent depths of the castle, another kind of lesson was being prepared in secret. While the other founders taught in the sunlit classrooms above, Salazar Slytherin descended into the deepest, most secret veins of the castle. There, far from the sounds of laughter and learning, he began a project of profound defiance. Using ancient, powerful magics the others knew nothing about, he carved out a hidden chamber. This was not a classroom for shared knowledge, but a private sanctum, a vault for his most dangerous belief. And within its echoing depths, he concealed the very basilisk he had once commanded, a monstrous serpent slumbering in the dark, waiting for a call that might never come. The Chamber of Secrets was more than a room. It was a statement. It was his conviction given physical form, and buried like a weapon at the very heart of the school they had built together. In creating it, Salazar crossed a line from which there was no return. He was no longer just a dissenting voice. He was now a secret adversary, building a safeguard that was also a direct threat to his colleagues and the students they loved. The internal conflict that had simmered within him for years finally reached its peak. Every stone he magically shaped felt like a betrayal of the oaths he had sworn to Godric, Helga, and Rowena. He was actively constructing a tool that could unravel their entire dream, a stark embodiment of his belief that only a pure magical lineage could be trusted with power. This was the ultimate act of self-reliance, but it was also an act of profound isolation. His decision to make the chamber a legacy, accessible only to his own true heir, was the final severance. He was planting a seed of his own ideology deep within the castle walls, ensuring that his vision for a pure-blood fortress would outlive him, waiting for a future generation to awaken it. This single act transformed the philosophical conflict among the founders into something existentially dangerous. The school was no longer just a place of competing ideas. It now housed a latent, catastrophic threat. A sleeping monster and a secret command rested beneath the foundations, a permanent shadow on the legacy of Hogwarts. The stakes were no longer about educational methods, but about the potential survival of the students themselves. The castle itself seemed to sense this deep schism, this magical wound festering in its lower levels, perhaps in response to the dark, secret magic now rooted in its stones. The halls of Hogwarts began to welcome a different kind of resident. Mischievous, unpredictable, and utterly chaotic, the first poltergeists and enchanted artifacts began to make their presence known. The first enchanted pudding hit the Slytherin table with a sickly, wet splat. It was followed by another, and then a whole volley, each glob of dessert shimmering with a sticky, glue-like charm that immediately fused robes to benches and wands to plates. Shrieking laughter echoed from the rafters as Peeves the Poltergeist, now fully formed from the castle's own chaotic energy, somersaulted through the air. He was no mere ghost, but a physical force of pure, unadulterated mischief, and his debut was a direct challenge to the solemn order the founders had tried so hard to build. The Great Hall, Helga's sanctuary of unity, descended into pandemonium. Students shrieked and scrambled, trying to peel themselves free, while the sticky pudding began to slowly drip from the enchanted ceiling like bizarre, sweet rain. The four founders rose from the high table, their faces a mirror of their core philosophies. Godric Gryffindor's shoulders shook with barely suppressed laughter, a broad grin spreading across his face as he watched the chaos. He saw in Peeves a wild, untamable spirit that reminded him of the forest itself, a force that could not, and perhaps should not be entirely controlled. Helga Hufflepuff's heart sank. She stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm, trying to appeal to the poltergeist's sense of community. "Peeves, dear, this is our shared home," she called out. "We can find a place for you, but not like this." Her words were met with a raspberry and a freshly conjured water balloon that burst over a group of terrified first years. Rowena Ravenclaw's mind was already racing, her sharp eyes tracking Peeves' flight patterns. She began devising complex logical traps and magical paradoxes, certain that intellect could outmaneuver chaos. She She whispered a spell designed to create an invisible, enchanted maze in the air around him, but Peeves simply phased through the walls, his cackle echoing with the sound of shattering glass. Salazar Slytherin's reaction was immediate and cold. "This is not mischief. This is anarchy," he hissed, his hand gripping his wand so tightly his knuckles turned white. He demanded they combine their power to exorcise the spirit immediately, to tear him from the castle's very fabric with overwhelming force. He saw Peeves not as a prankster, but as a symptom of the weakness he had always warned against, a disorder that must be purged. Their individual attempts were utter failures. Godric's good-natured shouts only encouraged the poltergeist. Helga's reasoning was mocked. Rowena's clever traps were dismantled with glee, and when Salazar finally unleashed a binding curse of dark, coiling energy, Peeves simply caught it, tied it into a bow, and tossed it back. They stood amidst the dripping, sticky ruin of their feast, 4 of the most powerful witches and wizards of the age, utterly bested by a single chaotic entity. Forced to act together, they reached a messy, unsatisfying compromise. They could not destroy Peeves, for he was now a part of the castle's magical ecosystem, but they could not allow him to run completely wild. Their collective decision was one of reluctant tolerance, a decree that the poltergeist would be managed, not mastered. This was not a unified victory, but a public admission of their fractured will. If they could not present a united front against a single poltergeist, how could they possibly hope to govern a school? The failure to control Peeves was a small, humiliating crack in their foundation, a symbol that the internal order of Hogwarts was as fragile as the alliance that had built it. This internal disarray would soon be tested by a threat from the outside world, one that would force them to remember what they had once fought for. The distant thunder was not from the sky, but from the first heavy stone crashing against the shimmering barrier that veiled the castle. A Muggle lord, his banner a stark symbol of fear, had brought his army to their doorstep. Siege engines hurled fire and rock, their flames licking hungrily at Godric's protective enchantments. For the first time, the theoretical dangers Salazar had always warned of were a roaring, physical reality. Senior students huddled in the entrance hall, their wands held in trembling hands, while the founders faced the first true test of their sanctuary's strength. The debate was immediate and fierce, echoing in the tense space between spells. Salazar's eyes burned with a cold fire. "They are at our walls," he argued, his voice a sharp hiss. "We must answer their violence with overwhelming force, with curses that will teach a lesson their kind will never forget. To show mercy is to show weakness, and weakness invites destruction." Godric stood before the great oak doors, his own sword now drawn, its silver blade reflecting the fiery assaults outside. "No," he countered, his voice booming with conviction. "We are not here to become the monsters they fear. We defend, we do not slaughter. Our magic can shield, it can confound, it can turn their own weapons against them without spilling a single drop of blood." The school itself seemed to hold its breath, the stones vibrating with the conflict of these two irreconcilable wills. It was Helga and Rowena who forged the desperate compromise. Helga's magic surged into the very earth, causing thick, thorny vines to erupt from the soil, tangling the siege engines and tripping the advancing soldiers. Rowena, with breathtaking precision, wove illusions of a massive scaled dragon appearing over the battlements, a terrifying sight that shattered the army's formation without a single real breath of fire. Godric led a charge of the oldest students, not to strike, but to reinforce the shields, their combined magic creating a brilliant, domed barrier that repelled the incoming fire. And Salazar, his jaw clenched in furious resignation, unleashed not the killing curses he advocated, but a thick, immobilizing fog that seeped into the lungs of the soldiers, causing them to collapse into a deep, unwakeable sleep. The combined strategy worked. The Lord's army, bewildered, entangled, and terrified, broke and fled into the forest. Hogwarts was safe, but as the last echoes of battle faded, the victory felt hollow. The school was saved, but the Alliance was wounded. Salazar stood apart from the others, watching the retreat. He saw not a triumph of collective magic, but a failure of nerve. They had the power to end the threat permanently, to make an example that would keep other Muggle lords away for generations, and they had chosen to simply put their enemy to sleep. In his eyes, this restraint was not wisdom, it was a fatal flaw. The attack proved their sanctuary was a beacon in the darkness, one that would always attract those who feared its light. The external threat was gone, but the internal one, born from this fundamental disagreement on how to survive in a hostile world, now pulsed with a dangerous new life. The cracks in their foundation, once hairline fractures, had been struck by a hammer, and they could no longer be ignored. The sticky remnants of the siege had barely been cleared from the Great Hall when a new, colder confrontation began. Salazar Slytherin did not call for a private meeting. He stood before the high table as students filed in for the evening meal, his voice cutting through the murmurs with the sharpness of a blade. He pointed a long finger toward the main doors, still bearing the faint scorch marks from the assault. That attack was not a random act of violence, he declared. It was a direct consequence of their policy. Every Muggle-born student they sheltered was a potential informant, a cultural bridge to the world that hated and feared them. He demanded, then and there, that they close the doors to any child, not of pure magical descent, purging the school of what he called its greatest vulnerability. The hall fell into a stunned, icy silence. First years clutched their goblets, their eyes wide with confusion, while older students exchanged uneasy glances. The unity of the recent defense shattered in an instant. Godric Gryffindor rose to his full height, his face a mask of grim disappointment. He did not shout. He spoke with a heavy, resonant finality. To turn away a magical child for the circumstances of their birth, he said, would be to betray the very heart of their sanctuary. It would make them no better than the fearful mobs at their gates. Helga Hufflepuff, her hands clasped tightly, added that loyalty and hard work were not traits bred from bloodlines, but grown from character, and that every student in her house, regardless of origin, had proven their worth. Rowena Ravenclaw, her tone cool and logical, stated that brilliance was a random gift of magic itself, and to restrict their intake based on parentage was to willfully dim their collective light. The three of them stood together, an unbreakable front. They had built this dream on the principle that magic itself was the only qualification that mattered. They would not abandon it. Salazar looked from one face to the next, his own expression hardening into something ancient and immovable. He saw not wisdom in their unity, but folly. He saw a future where their noble ideals would be the death of everything they had built. In that moment, the last thread of their alliance snapped. Without another word, he turned. His robes swept around him as he walked away from the high table, down the length of the silent hall, and out through the great oak doors. He did not look back. The decision to leave Hogwarts, the castle whose stones he had helped conjure from the earth, was not a retreat. It was a statement of absolute, bitter conviction. His pride would not allow him to remain and watch his warnings go unheeded, and his beliefs would not permit him to govern alongside those he now saw as dangerously naive. The sound of the door closing echoed like a tomb seal in the hall. A founder was gone. His departure was not just a personal failure. It was the collapse of the four-pillar foundation upon which the school stood. The dream of unity was broken, and in its place, it left a permanent and divisive legacy. The idea that magical blood defined worth, a seed of conflict that would lie dormant in the castle's heart for centuries. With Salazar's chair standing empty, a palpable void settled over the school. The remaining three founders were left with an impossible burden: to guide a wounded institution into a future forever shadowed by the one who had abandoned it. The silence Salazar left behind was a presence in itself, a cold draft in every sunlit corridor. The three remaining founders stood in the heart of their creation, the castle feeling both a sanctuary and a monument to a shattered dream. They could not undo the schism, but they could ensure their shared vision would endure. In the highest tower, under a sky blazing with stars, they joined hands. This was not a spell of construction, but of consecration. Godric's magic flowed like molten gold, a fierce, protective fire that sank into the stone. Helga's power followed, a deep, nurturing hum that wove itself into the mortar, promising growth and resilience. Rowena's enchantment was a silver lattice of pure logic and memory, a web of intelligence to guide the castle for ages. Together, they performed a final, tripartite enchantment, binding their three distinct magical signatures into the very bedrock of Hogwarts. The castle shuddered, accepting their offering. Its walls grew denser, its enchantments more nuanced and deeply rooted. It became more than a building. It was now a sentient monument to their enduring will, capable of subtle magic of its own, from guiding lost students to shifting its own lay, out to meet a need. Yet, the magic was fundamentally incomplete. The ancient, formidable wards Salazar had woven were now static, unable to evolve. A subtle fragility remained in the deepest foundations, a permanent scar of his absence that no amount of powerful magic could ever fully heal. In the quiet moments that followed, the grief and guilt surfaced. Had they been too rigid? Could a different word, a different compromise, have kept their brother in magic at their side? Godric wrestled with the thought that his own unbending principles had driven his friend away. Helga mourned the loss of their four-part harmony, while Rowena analyzed every past argument, searching for the logical misstep that led to this rupture. Ultimately, they each arrived at the same painful conclusion, that Salazar's departure was not a single event, but the inevitable result of a path he had chosen long ago. His beliefs were a part of him, as intrinsic as the magic in his blood. Letting him go was the only way to save the school. This acceptance forged a new, steely resolve within them. They would not let his absence break them. Instead, they dedicated themselves to the school and its students with a fierce, renewed purpose. Their mission was no longer just about education. It was a rebuttal to Salazar's ideology, a living proof that a world built on inclusion and shared strength could not only survive, but flourish. The weight of this responsibility was immense. The entire future of their secret society, the safety and education of every magical child in the land, now rested entirely on their 3 shoulders. Their success or failure would echo through countless generations, shaping the very soul of the wizarding world. This commitment would now be tested by the relentless passage of time, and a question they had never dared to consider: who would carry their legacy when they were gone? The task of finding a headmaster forced a difficult truth into the open. They were not immortal. For the first time, Godric, Helga, and Rowena had to confront the reality that the school would one day have to exist without them, and the choice of its first leader would dictate whether it thrived or crumbled. They began a quiet, years-long observation, watching their most promising senior students and inviting renowned magical figures to the castle as guests. Every candidate was measured against an ideal they struggled to define. Godric, of course, was drawn to the brave and the bold, those who showed fearless initiative in the face of a challenge. He saw a potential headmaster in a 7th year who had single-handedly faced down a troll that wandered too close to Hogsmeade. Helga, however, gently pointed out that the same student had a tendency to overlook the quieter, struggling classmates in his pursuit of glory. She championed a different individual, one known for their immense patience and unwavering fairness, who spent their free time helping first years master basic levitation charms. Rowena, in turn, argued that while kindness was vital, the headmaster must possess a towering intellect, a mind capable of understanding the castle's deepest magical laws and outthinking any threat. She proposed a brilliant but aloof arithmancy prodigy who had already written 2 advanced texts. Their private meetings became gentle battlegrounds of philosophy. It was no longer about which house was best, but which combination of traits was most essential for the school's survival. Could a leader be too brave, risking the school on a principle? Could they be too kind, failing to make the hard choices a fortress sometimes required? Was a brilliant mind useless if it could not connect with the heart of a frightened child? These debates were some of the most painful of their lives, for they were arguing about the very soul of Hogwarts itself. The breakthrough came during a particularly tense discussion. Godric, frustrated, slammed his hand on the table and declared that the headmaster must be, above all else, for every student. The words hung in the air, silencing the room. He was right. The leader of Hogwarts could not simply be a champion for Gryffindors, or a patron for Hufflepuffs, or a scholar for Ravenclaws. They had to be a guardian for all. This realization was a profound and humbling compromise. It meant setting aside their personal pride in their own houses and admitting that the perfect leader would likely be a blend of all their values, a person they themselves had not created. This led to their most difficult and most vital decision. They agreed that the first headmaster would not come from their own inner circle, nor would it be one of their star pupils. To choose a protege would be to elevate one house's values above the others, creating a schism from the very start. The school had to become bigger than its founders. They needed a leader from the wider wizarding world, someone who saw Hogwarts not as a monument to 4 individuals, but as a living, breathing institution for the future. The weight of this choice was immense. A headmaster who favored one house could breed resentment and division for centuries. A leader who lacked the strength to unite them could see the school fracture into warring factions. A misguided choice could unravel every spell, every ward, and every dream they had woven into the castle's stones, placing the entire future of their secret society in jeopardy. As they narrowed their search to a handful of truly balanced and wise candidates from beyond their walls, they turned to a more personal form of legacy, creating magical artifacts that would forever embody their individual spirits. The echo of Salazar's departure seemed to settle into the castle's very stones, a quiet reminder that their time, too, was not endless. In the face of this new fragility, the three remaining founders turned from governing to a more intimate form of creation, each crafting a final testament to the values they held most dear. Godric Gryffindor retreated to the forges he had built, the air shimmering with heat and purpose. He did not summon a master enchanter, but worked the metal himself, hammering pure silver into the form of a magnificent sword. With every strike, he poured his essence into the blade, a magic that was less about sharpness and more about intent. He enchanted it to appear only to a true Gryffindor, one whose heart demonstrated valor not for glory, but for a righteous cause. This was not a weapon for conquest, but a tool for defense, a promise that courage would always find the means to protect the helpless. In her sunlit chambers overlooking the herbology gardens, Helga Hufflepuff worked with a different kind of magic. She took a simple, sturdy golden cup and filled it not with liquid, but with an enchantment of abundance and loyalty. Her spell was one of nurturing, a charm so potent that any drink poured from it would taste of comfort and safety, strengthening the spirit as much as the body. She willed the cup to reveal itself only to those who proved themselves unwaveringly loyal and just, those who valued hard work and fair play above all else. It was a relic of community, a small, radiant heart for her house, ensuring that its members would always have a source of sustenance and solidarity. High in the Ravenclaw Tower, Rowena completed the work she had begun long ago. The silver diadem, now perfected, rested in her hands, its sapphire blue stone gleaming with captured starlight. She finalized the enchantment that would enhance the wisdom of the wearer, but she added a final, crucial command. The diadem would not allow itself to be worn by one who sought knowledge for power or prestige. It would only answer to a mind driven by a pure, insatiable curiosity, a desire to learn for the sheer joy of understanding. In this, she ensured that her house's greatest treasure would guide only those who respected the intellect as a journey, not a destination. The act of creating these relics was profoundly bittersweet. They were not just gifts, but admissions. In weaving their deepest virtues into these objects, Godric, Helga, and Rowena acknowledged they would not walk these halls forever. They were ensuring that their guidance would outlive their physical presence, that a worthy student in a distant century could still feel the echo of a founder's belief. This decision to tie the artifacts to virtue, not bloodline or raw power, was their final, collective answer to Salazar's ideology. True legacy, they declared, was not about who you were born to, but who you chose to become. The weight of this choice was immense, for it raised the cultivation of character in their students, from a simple lesson to a matter of eternal importance. The future of their houses now depended not just on teaching spells, but on fostering the very bravery, loyalty, and wisdom that could one day summon these legendary objects from the shadows. These enchanted items would soon pass into legend themselves, just as the remarkable witches and wizards who made them were beginning to fade from the world, their story solidifying into the bedrock of history. The air in the astronomy tower was thin and cold, carrying the sharp scent of night-blooming flowers from the gardens far below. Rowena Ravenclaw stood before her students for the final time, her hands resting gently on the stone balustrade as if drawing strength from the castle itself. She did not speak of complex spells or advanced enchantments. Instead, her voice, though softened by time, held a clarity that captured the very essence of the stars glittering above them. She spoke of the quiet joy found in a question without an immediate answer, the profound satisfaction of a mystery unraveled not for power or praise, but for the simple, sacred beauty of knowing. This, she imparted, was the purest form of magic, a lifelong conversation with the universe that never truly ended. The silence that followed her words was not empty, but filled with a deep, resonant understanding. Every witch and wizard present felt the weight of her legacy, the unspoken command to carry the torch of curiosity forward into the world. Yet, as her students filed out, their hearts full and their minds alight, a private sorrow settled over Rowena. Looking out at the magnificent castle, she saw the ghost of a more perfect dream. Her vision had once been of a single, seamless tapestry of knowledge, where every thread, every house, was woven tightly together into one brilliant whole. The reality was a quilt of distinct, and sometimes divided, patches. The absence of Salazar was a tear in the fabric she could not mend, and the knowledge that her own time was growing short made the imperfection ache all the more. She was immensely proud of what they had built, this fortress of learning that would outlive them all, but a part of her would always mourn the unified institution that could have been. This internal conflict guided her final, solitary decision. Late that night, she ascended the winding stairs to her private study, the silver diadem cool in her hands. It gleamed in the moonlight, a vessel of immense intellectual power, but she now understood that such power was not a prize to be claimed, nor a tool to be handed down. True wisdom was not bestowed, it was earned through the relentless, often lonely, pursuit of truth, and so she would not bequeath it to a successor or lock it away in a vault. With a whispered spell that felt like a final release, she hid her masterpiece. She concealed it not as a treasure to be found, but as the ultimate puzzle, a final test for a mind that valued the journey of discovery above the destination of possession. Its resting place would be a secret, its purpose a mystery, awaiting a seeker whose curiosity was as pure as her own. Her passing, when it came, was as quiet as the turning of a page in an ancient book. It marked the undeniable end of their founding era. The great hall felt emptier, the conversations in the staff room more subdued. Godric and Helga, the last original pillars of Hogwarts, now stood together in a silence that spoke volumes. The weight of stewardship, of guiding this colossal, magical entity into an uncertain future, settled upon their shoulders with a new and profound heaviness. Helga Hufflepuff felt the seasons turn within the castle's stones, a deep, slow rhythm that told her a final winter was approaching. While others might have sought to secure their legacy in grand artifacts or secret knowledge, her thoughts turned to the most fundamental magic of all, the simple, daily act of nourishment. In the final year of her life, she gathered her remaining strength and descended to the kitchens. The warm, bustling heart nestled beneath the great hall. There, surrounded by the dedicated house elves, she began her last and greatest enchantment. Her hands, though weathered with age, moved with a gentle certainty over the hearths and ovens, the pots and planting beds in the adjacent greenhouses. She did not weave spells of power, but of perpetuity, charms of endless renewal and boundless generosity. She ensured the ovens would always bake the perfect loaf, the soup cauldrons would never empty, and the greenhouses would forever yield their magical harvest, season after season, century after century. This was not a monument to be admired, but a force to be felt, a permanent, sustaining magic that would whisper her name in every shared meal and every satisfied stomach. The knowledge of her own limited time pressed heavily upon her, a quiet urgency that sharpened her focus. She saw the future not as a parade of great wizards, but as a continuous stream of children, some lonely, some afraid, all in need of a welcoming smile and a warm plate. Her final battle was not against a dark creature, but against the specters of hunger and neglect. Her victory would be a castle where no student, regardless of their house or bloodline, would ever feel those cold touches. To secure this promise, she turned to the most loyal beings she knew. She gathered the house elves and spoke to them not as servants, but as partners in her vision. She charged them with an eternal duty to care for every student within the castle walls with the same fierce devotion they showed her. It was a decision that forged a bond of mutual loyalty and service, a magical contract of the heart that would endure for 1,000 years. In this final, selfless act, Helga cemented her legacy as the unwavering heart of Hogwarts. She ensured that the values of hard work, loyalty, and fair play were not just lessons taught in a classroom, but principles baked into the very bread and woven into the castle's comforting warmth. Her magic became a daily, quiet miracle, a testament to the profound truth that the strongest foundations are built not on power, but on care. With Helga's work complete, the castle's heart now beat with a rhythm all its own, leaving only one of the 4 founders remaining to watch over the flourishing of their dream. News of the beast's rampage reached the castle walls on a chill autumn wind. An elderly Godric Gryffindor, his hair as white as winter frost, but his back still straight, listened as a terrified messenger described the creature's path of destruction through a distant village. The other teachers urged caution, suggesting they send a team of trained aurors, but Godric simply walked to the stand where his silver sword rested, his gnarled fingers closing around the familiar hilt. He would not send others to face a danger he could meet himself. This was the code he had lived by, and he would not abandon it in his final years. The journey was long, his joints aching with a cold he had never felt in his youth. When he finally stood at the edge of the village, the scene was one of pure devastation, homes shattered and fields scorched. The beast itself was a monstrous fusion of scale and shadow, a relic of a wilder, more dangerous magical world. Godric did not hesitate. He stepped into the clearing, his sword catching the weak sunlight, and called out a challenge. The fight was not the swift, glorious duel of his legends. It was a brutal, exhausting struggle, a test of endurance against a foe of primal fury. He moved with the hard-won wisdom of a lifetime of combat, his strikes precise and economical, each parry a lesson in defense. He turned the creature's own rage against it, luring it into a trap of its own making. With one final, focused lunge, he found his opening, and the beast fell. But the victory came at a terrible cost. A deep, grievous wound bled freely, and Godric knew his own strength was spent. As he lay against a great oak tree, his breathing grew shallow, and his mind drifted across the decades. He saw the faces of thousands of students he had taught, their moments of bravery large and small. He felt a swelling pride for the castle on the hill, a sanctuary that had indeed flourished. Yet, cutting through this pride was a sharp, unhealed sorrow. He remembered a young Salazar, not as an ideological rival, but as a brother, standing back to back with him against dangers long forgotten. He mourned not the man Salazar became, but the friend he had lost, the shared laughter, and the formidable unity they had once possessed. That fractured friendship was the one battle he could never truly win. With his last reserves of magic, he held his sword aloft. He did not speak the name of a single heir, for bravery was not a trait passed down by blood. Instead, he whispered an enchantment that would bind the blade to the very essence of the castle, to the spirit of his house. He willed it to appear only when a true Gryffindor, one whose heart valued courage for a just cause above all else, had need of it. His final decision was his ultimate lesson, a trust placed not in a person, but in a principle. He was not leaving a weapon, he was leaving a promise that the brave would never be left unarmed. As the light faded from his eyes, the last of the four pillars holding up the world of Hogwarts was gone. The direct guidance of the founders was now a memory, their voices silent. The magnificent castle, with all its magic, mystery, and lingering conflicts, was now a legacy entirely in the hands of the future. And so, the era of the founders closed, but the castle they built was only just beginning its story. The great hall felt different that September evening, its enchanted ceiling reflecting a sky of deep twilight purple. For the first time, none of the four high-backed chairs at the staff table were occupied by a founder. In their place stood a single wizard, a former student whose name was already whispered with respect for his powerful, balanced magic and his unshakable fairness. As he called the hall to silence, the weight of centuries seemed to settle onto his shoulders. This was the first start-of-term feast, led entirely by a successor, a definitive passing of the torch. The Sorting Hat sang its familiar song of four distinct virtues, but the new headmaster heard the old tensions woven between the lines. He watched as first years were divided into tables, seeing not just eager children, but the seeds of rivalries the founders themselves had planted. A whispered taunt of Snake from a Griffine door, a dismissive remark about showy bravery from a Slytherin. These were the living echoes of a debate that had never been truly resolved. He knew his greatest challenge would not be teaching advanced charms or potions, but managing this inherited discord. The legend of Salazar Slytherin's departure was already a ghost in the castle, muttering about a hidden chamber and a monstrous heir. Some students looked at their Slytherin peers with a new, unspoken suspicion, a division that threatened the very unity the school was meant to embody. In that moment, the new headmaster made a conscious and vital decision. He would not pretend the schism had never happened. In his opening address, he spoke the names of all four founders with equal reverence. He celebrated Godric's courage, Helga's devotion, Rowena's wisdom, and yes, even Salazar's formidable legacy of cunning and determination. He refused to erase the painful parts of their history, understanding that the school's strength lay in its complex, complete story. This was not an endorsement of Salazar's final beliefs, but an acknowledgement that his magic and his ambition were irrevocably part of the castle's foundation. To ignore him would be to leave a wound forever open. The school's future now hinged on this delicate balance, on the wisdom of each new leader who would sit in the headmaster's study. It was a chain of custody stretching into an uncertain future, each link tasked with upholding a dream while navigating its inherent contradictions. Could a single person hold four competing ideals in harmony? As the feast began, and the hall filled with the clatter of plates and cheerful chatter, a subtle shift occurred. The castle's ancient magic, which had thrummed with the distinct signatures of its creators, seemed to soften its edges, its protective enchantments settling into a new, quieter rhythm. Hogwarts was no longer a personal project. It was an enduring institution, and it had just accepted its first new guardian. The stone gargoyles shifted on their perches, their granite eyes seeming to follow the students who passed beneath them. It began subtly at first, a staircase that had been still for months, suddenly swinging away just as a professor hurried to class, forcing a long, unexpected detour. Then came the doors that appeared where none had been before, leading to cozy, sunlit rooms filled with exactly the books a stressed fifth year needed for their exams. The castle was no longer just a structure. It was stirring from a long slumber, the sentient magic of its creators blooming into full, unpredictable life. The enchantments Godric, Helga, and Rowena had woven into its foundations were not static spells, but a living will, a collective consciousness that now actively participated in the daily rhythm of the school. Hogwarts had truly awakened. This transformation created a unique set of challenges for the staff. A professor might prepare a lesson in the defense against the dark arts classroom, only to find the door stubbornly locked, the room itself having decided it was better suited for a different subject that day. A lost first year, tears welling in their eyes, might suddenly find a shortcut materializing in a solid wall, guiding them safely back to their common room. The castle was not merely a building, it was a partner in education, one with a mind of its own and a sometimes cryptic way of communicating. It tested the teachers as much as the students, demanding they learn its unique language of shifting architecture and responsive magic. The headmaster, facing this new reality, made a pivotal decision. He gathered the entire staff and declared they would not fight the castle's whims, but embrace them. They would teach the students to treat Hogwarts with the same respect they would show a living professor. This was not a haunted house to be feared, but a guardian to be understood. Corridor by corridor, the staff learned to interpret the signs. A warm draft from a hearth indicating a safe path, a sudden chill warning of a tricky staircase ahead. They taught the children to listen to the hum of the stones and to thank a room that had provided them shelter. This decision forged a profound, magical symbiosis. The castle, feeling the trust and respect of its inhabitants, seemed to grow more cooperative, its protections more intuitive. It was no longer a static monument to the past, but a dynamic, evolving character in its own epic. Its cooperation became essential, a vital component in the school's survival. A hidden passage might open to lead a student away from a brewing confrontation, or a suit of armor might clatter to the ground, creating a distraction that prevented a dangerous prank. The very walls seemed to learn the hearts of those who walked them, offering comfort to the lonely and gentle obstacles to the overconfident. As the castle matured into this vibrant, sentient being, the legends of the four extraordinary individuals who had built it began to crystallize, hardening from recent memory into the ancient bedrock of wizarding culture itself. A traveling bard might pause in a village square, his voice rising and falling with the rhythm of a new song about Godric Griff, Eindor's silver sword, or Helga Hufflepuff's enchanted cup. In taverns and at crossroads, the tales began to spread, each storyteller adding their own flourish to the legends of the four. They spoke of an unbreakable friendship, of four hearts beating as one to raise a castle from the Scottish Highlands. The painful schism, the bitter arguments, and Salazar's lonely departure were carefully omitted, polished away like a rough edge on a precious stone. The founders were transforming from complex people into perfect symbols, their lives distilled into the four virtues they championed. Godric was no longer a man who wrestled with guilt over a lost friend, but the very embodiment of courage. Helga was pure loyalty, Rowena absolute wisdom, and Salazar, now always mentioned in the same breath as the other three, became cunning and ambition personified. These simplified archetypes were easier for children to understand, and they quickly became the foundation of house identity. A young which sorted into Slytherin might now proudly embrace ambition as her birthright, never knowing that Salazar's own ambition had been tempered by a profound fear for his people's survival. A Gryffindor might chase glory, unaware that Godric's bravery was so often intertwined with a deep sense of protection for the vulnerable. The stories, meant to inspire, also created a distorted lens through which every student viewed their peers. A rivalry between houses was no longer just a schoolyard competition. It was a reenactment of a mythic conflict whose true origins had been forgotten. The professors of Hogwarts watched this myth-making with a quiet understanding. They made a collective, unspoken choice to focus their lessons on the positive legacies, on the grand achievements, and the powerful magic. What good would it do, they reasoned, to burden 11-year-olds with the weight of a 1,000-year-old betrayal? Their goal was to build a cohesive school community, to use these archetypes to motivate and unite. They taught that every house was essential, that the castle needed all four pillars to stand. Yet, in avoiding the difficult history, they left a vacuum. Without the full context of the founders' struggles, the house traits could harden into stereotypes. The nuance was lost, and in its place, a simpler, and sometimes more prejudiced, understanding began to take root. The education of every new generation was now fundamentally shaped by these curated legends. Teaching a student to cast a shield charm was straightforward, but teaching them the true meaning of Godric's chivalry, or the complex loyalty Helga demanded, was a far greater challenge. The professors were not just instructors of magic, they were the guardians of a fragmented history, tasked with transmitting values whose original context was fading from memory. They had to hope that the castle itself, with its living memory etched into the stones, would teach the lessons they could not openly speak. These carefully crafted stories would be passed down for 1,000 years, whispered to first years wide-eyed with wonder as they crossed the Black Lake for the very first time. A quiet revolution took place high in the astronomy tower, far from the debates of historians. The professor who spent his life charting the heavens saw the story of the founders not as a conflict, but as a constellation. On a clear, crisp night, he completed a new celestial map, and with a stroke of his enchanted quill, he assigned 4 brilliant, newly charted stars the names Godric, Helga, Rowena, and Salazar. There, in the silent, eternal expanse above, the 4 were finally and perfectly united. It was a gesture of profound reconciliation, an acknowledgement that the school needed the courage of one, the heart of another, the mind of the third, and even the formidable ambition of the last to become the enduring institution it was meant to be. This act was not without its critics. Some scholars argued it was a disservice to history, a pretty fiction that whitewashed Salazar's bitter departure and the dark legacy he left simmering in the castle's depths. They felt it was wrong to honor him equally alongside the 3 who had remained faithful to their original, inclusive dream. Yet, a more powerful, human sentiment prevailed across the wizarding world. People chose to commemorate the monumental achievement over the painful disagreement. They preferred to look up and see a complete celestial family, a reminder that greatness is often forged in the complicated fires of collaboration and conflict. This collective decision cemented the founders' story as the foundational myth for all of British wizardry. Their names, now whispered in tandem with the turning of the celestial spheres, became as fixed in the culture as the stars were in the sky. The tale of the 4 friends who built a castle was no longer just a history, it was an identity, and as those stars shone down, the castle below continued its eternal work. A new kind of magic settled into the castle's stones, one of pigment and memory. The most skilled enchanters of the age were summoned, their task to create the first enchanted portraits of the 4 founders. This was no simple matter of capturing a likeness. Using profound memory charms, they wove fragments of the founders' own personalities, their core wisdom, and their most defining experiences directly into the canvas. The result was more than art. It was a living echo, a magical snapshot of who they were at the moment of the painting's creation. These portraits could offer counsel, share recollections, and even debate points of magic, becoming a direct, interactive link to the school's very origins. Yet, they were not the complete individuals, but a reflection, shaped by the specific memories chosen for preservation. The portraits of Godric, Helga, and Rowena quickly became cherished advisors. Godric's painting would boom with encouragement during times of crisis, while Helga's gentle image offered solace and practical wisdom. Rowena's portrait could be found deep in conversation with a curious professor, unraveling a complex arithmetic equation. But the portrait of Salazar Slytherin was a different matter entirely. It was notoriously difficult and uncooperative, a constant, silent reminder of the broken fellowship. For days, sometimes years, he would refuse to speak, his painted eyes staring coldly from the canvas. On the rare occasions he did offer counsel, his words were cryptic, laced with a bitterness that had only deepened with time. He was an island of simmering discontent, hanging on the wall. Faced with this stark division, the headmaster of the time made a bold and symbolic decision. He would not hang the portraits separately, allowing their ideological isolation to continue. Instead, he commissioned a single, secure chamber, a gallery where all 4 founder portraits would be displayed together. His intention was to force a dialogue, however strained, for the good of the school. He He believed that even in their painted forms, the founders needed to bear witness to one another, to see the legacy they had built collectively. The tension in that room was palpable, a magical atmosphere, thick with unspoken arguments and 1,000 years of regret. The stakes of this project were immense from the very beginning. These portraits were not mere decorations. They were to become a primary historical resource. The accurate capture of the founders' essences was crucial, a sacred duty for the enchanters. A distorted portrayal of Godric's courage could inspire recklessness. A diluted version of Helga's kindness could weaken the school's heart. And the portrait of Salazar, if it failed to capture the complexity of his conviction and his fear, would reduce him to a simple villain, erasing the nuanced truth of his formidable role in the castle's creation. The enchanters worked with immense care, knowing they were preserving the school's original intent for all future generations. These silent watchers, now bound together in their gilded frames, would observe the quiet flow of centuries, seeing their own legacy play out in the triumphs, fears, and boundless potential of countless young lives passing through the halls below. Centuries of whispers hardened into a terrifying reality when a student, a direct descendant of Salazar Slytherin, stood in a second-floor girls' bathroom and spoke a single, sibilant command in a language forgotten by most of the world. A sink basin sank into the floor, revealing a dark, slimy tunnel that descended into the castle's deepest foundations. The legend of the Chamber of Secrets was true. With that discovery, the latent danger Salazar had embedded in the school's heart was violently awakened. His sleeping basilisk, a serpent of immense and ancient power, was unleashed to fulfill its creator's grim purpose, to purge the school of those he deemed unworthy. The first victim was not a student, but a ghost, found hovering petrified and terrified, her translucent form frozen mid-scream. Then others followed, students and a cat, all discovered stiff and unmoving, their bodies perfectly preserved, but their lives suspended, the horror reflected permanently in their unseeing eyes. The school was plunged into a state of pure terror. Whispers of Slytherin's monster echoed through the corridors, and suspicion fell heavily upon his house, turning classmates against one another. This was not an external siege, but a sickness from within, a foundational conflict made terrifyingly real. The current headmaster and the entire staff, for all their knowledge, were powerless. Their defensive magic was designed to repel outside threats, not a monster that moved through the pipes and walls of the castle itself, a creature born from the very ideology that had helped build their home. In this chaos, a young student named Ginny Weasley, possessed by the very artifact that had guided the heir, was taken into the chamber itself, her life force slowly draining away to feed the resurrection of Slytherin's legacy. It fell to another student, a young boy named Harry Potter, to follow. He descended into the damp, skeletal remains of the chamber, a cavern littered with the bones of ancient creatures, and came face to face with the colossal basilisk. Its gaze meant instant death, and its venom could destroy anything it touched. In that moment, with his wand broken and his friend's life hanging in the balance, a fiery courage ignited within him, a valor that would have made Godric Gryffindor nod in approval. As the serpent struck, a burst of scarlet and gold appeared. The sorting hat, placed upon his head by a loyal friend, yielded not a solution, but a weapon. From its enchanted depths slid the gleaming silver sword of Gryffindor, appearing only for a true champion in a moment of dire need, Harry did not wield the sword with the skill of a master duelist, but with the desperate, righteous strength of someone fighting to save a life. He met the Basilisk's charge, driving the goblin-made blade upward into the roof of the monster's mouth. The serpent thrashed and fell, its dark magic dissipating into the cold air. In that single, decisive act, the values of one founder, courage in defense of others, directly confronted and defeated the darkest legacy of another. The victory was profound, saving a life and temporarily sealing the chamber, but it was also a sobering lesson. It proved that the past at Hogwarts is a living, breathing force. The choices made 1,000 years ago, the bitter arguments and the secret betrayals, were not locked away in history books. They were dormant seeds, capable of sprouting into life and death situations for generations yet unborn. The defeat of the monster brought a fragile peace back to the castle walls, and the petrified victims were restored to health. Yet, the legend of the Chamber of Secrets remained, serving as an eternal cautionary tale etched into the school's memory. It was a permanent reminder that the founder's dream was a complex tapestry, woven with threads of both luminous hope and a single, dark strand of fearful exclusion. This near catastrophe underscored a terrifying truth for every future headmaster, that governing Hogwarts meant being a guardian not only of its students, but of its deeply complicated and sometimes dangerous history. The school's very survival would forever depend on understanding that the echoes of its creation could still be heard in the silence between classes, a whisper of ancient conflict, waiting for the right moment to speak again. The Triwizard Tournament arrived at Hogwarts like a storm of international magic. Its arrival, announced by the sudden appearance of the towering Beauxbaton's carriage and the Durmstrang ship emerging from the lake's depths. For the first time in over a century, the castle's halls were filled with the sounds of foreign languages and the palpable tension of a historic competition. When the Goblet of Fire spat out its final champion's name, it was not just a student it selected, but a living emblem of the founder's legacy. The Hogwarts champion, a Muggle-born witch from Gryffindor, stood as a direct contradiction to Salazar Slytherin's deepest fears and a triumphant validation of Godric's inclusive ideals. Each task of the tournament became a global stage where the founder's core values were tested under extreme pressure. In the first challenge, facing a Hungarian horntail, the champion's desperate, soaring flight was a spectacle of raw courage that would have made Godric Gryffindor pound the tables in approval. For the second task, submerged in the black depths of the lake, it was not brute force but cleverness and a deep understanding of magical law that unlocked the puzzle of the Merpeople's song, a solution bearing the clear, sharp imprint of Rowena Ravenclaw's intellect. And in the sprawling maze of the third task, when faced with the choice between sprinting for the trophy or stopping to aid a fallen competitor from a rival school, the champion's decision to help was a quiet, powerful testament to the unwavering loyalty Helga Hufflepuff prized above all else. This public display of virtue, however, sharpened the old divisions within the castle walls. The competition fueled a fierce, often ugly rivalry between the houses. Support for the Hogwarts champion was not universal. Whispers followed her, suggesting she had cheated her way into the tournament, that her Muggle birth made her an unworthy representative. This prejudice was a chilling echo of Salazar's own ideology, a reminder that his legacy of ambition and purity could still curdle into something dark and exclusionary. The school became a microcosm of the founders' original struggle, with students arguing in corridors about what truly defined a witch's worth, just as the founders had debated 1,000 years before. The tournament's climax was not merely a victory, but a profound symbolic act. To retrieve the Triwizard Cup, the champion did not rely on a single trait, but on a fluid combination of all four. A Slytherin's cunning was needed to navigate the maze tricks, a Ravenclaw's wit to solve its magical puzzles, a Hufflepuff's steadfastness to endure its psychological terrors, and finally, a Gryffindor's nerve to seize the cup despite the overwhelming odds. In that moment, the victor was not just a Gryffindor, but a true Hogwarts champion, a living embodiment of the school's complete, multifaceted heart. This victory resonated far beyond the Scottish Highlands. The eyes of all magical Europe had been watching, and the message was unmistakable. The school that had produced such a well-rounded and formidable witch was clearly doing something extraordinary. Hogwarts's international reputation soared, transforming the founders' values from an internal educational philosophy into a matter of global wizarding pride. The very survival and triumph of a Muggle-born student on that stage served as the most powerful possible argument against the lingering shadows of blood purity, proving that magical excellence was born from character, not lineage. Such world stage events continue to prove that the founders' vision was a living, evolving force, one that could adapt to new eras while still being tested by its oldest conflicts. Even as the school celebrated its international prestige, the castle itself began to respond to a new kind of threat, one that targeted the very memory and stability the founders had fought to protect. The castle's ancient stones screamed under the assault of dark curses and shattering enchantments. As the great battle raged, a profound, dormant magic stirred deep within the foundations. The enchantments Godric, Helga, and Rowena had woven into the very mortar 1,000 years earlier did not merely hold the walls together. They awakened in a final, defiant act of guardianship. The stone knights, standing silent vigil in the corridors, shook off centuries of dust, their granite swords ringing as they stepped from their plinths to form a living shield wall. The suits of armor clanked to life, moving with a single, unified purpose to defend every archway and staircase. This was not a spell cast by any living wizard, but the castle itself remembering the hands that built it, rising with the collective will of its founders to protect the children within. In the midst of the chaos, in a place of desperate need, a glint of silver appeared once more. The sword of Gryffindor, materializing within the Sorting Hat, found its way into the hands of a true hero. It was not a warrior of renown who wielded it, but a young woman whose courage was born from love and loyalty. In her hands, the blade was not a weapon of aggression, but a tool of ultimate destruction against the very sources of dark magic, a clear echo of Godric's vow that courage would always find a way to defend the helpless. The founder's magic was not a relic of the past in that moment. It was a living, breathing participant in the fight. The castle's shifting staircases redirected enemies into dead ends. Its hidden passages offered escape to the besieged, and its resilient walls absorbed curses that would have leveled any ordinary fortress. This cataclysm became the ultimate test of the four core philosophies born in that misty glen, so long ago, Godric's courage faced down a terrifying tyranny. Rowena's wisdom was pitted against a brutal, overwhelming force. Helga's loyalty was the bond that held the defenders together in the face of utter devastation. And the conflict Salazar had seeded, the bitter choice between inclusion and a fanatical purity, was fought in every corridor, as students from every house stood united against those who sought to purify their world. The defenders, from the bravest seventh year to the most determined first year, made a collective choice. They would not flee. They would stand and fight for the sanctuary that had been built for all of them, honoring the founders' immense sacrifice by becoming the very protectors the school was always meant to nurture. The stakes in that long, dark night could not have been higher. It was not merely a battle for a building, but for the future of the entire wizarding world. The outcome would determine whether a society built on the founders' inclusive, though imperfect, dream would survive or be replaced by one of absolute oppression and fear. Every spell cast, every act of bravery, every life given was a vote for the world Godric, Helga, and Rowena had envisioned. A world where magic was a gift to be nurtured in every child who possessed it, regardless of their origin. The castle itself seemed to understand this, fighting with every fiber of its enchanted being, a testament to the fact that a place built with so much love and hope would not fall easily to hatred. In the dawn after the battle, the scarred but standing castle was the greatest testament to its creator's power. The morning light revealed a castle of scars, its towers broken and its walls weeping dust. But as the sun climbed higher, it illuminated not a scene of defeat, but one of quiet, determined rebirth. They came from every corner of Britain, witches and wizards of every house and every blood status. Their wands held not as weapons, but as tools of mending. There were no assigned roles, no decrees from the ministry. A former Slytherin, his robes still smudged with soot, worked side by side with a Hufflepuff healer, their spells intertwining to lift a fallen buttress. An elderly Ravenclaw, who had studied the castle's foundational runes for decades, directed a team of Muggle-born ministry workers on where to channel their repair charms. It was a mosaic of magical Britain, each person a single tile in a vast, collaborative masterpiece. The magic they wove was different this time. It was not the raw, formidable power of 4 legendary founders, but something softer, wider, and profoundly resilient. It was a magic born from shared loss and collective hope, 1,000 different wills harmonizing into a single, restorative purpose. As their spells sank into the stone, the castle did not just regain its former shape, it absorbed this new, unifying energy. The enchantments in the walls seemed to hum with a deeper, more vibrant frequency, as if the very heart of Hogwarts was beating stronger, fortified by the love of those who had fought for it. This act of communal restoration forced a difficult but necessary conversation across the wizarding world. How had such darkness taken root in their safest place? The debates that followed in the weeks and months after mirrored the founder's own ancient struggle. The ideology of purity that Salazar Slytherin had championed, which had festered in secret for centuries, had now shown its full, devastating face. The restoration became a living rebuttal to that legacy, a physical manifestation of a society choosing a different path. Every repaired stone was a statement, a collective vow that the school would never again be a battleground for such hatred. In the quiet of the restored headmaster's office, the new leadership made a pivotal decision. The house system would remain, for it honored the founders' distinct virtues, but its expression would change. The hourglass that tracked house points would stand empty for a time. Inter-house collaborations would become the cornerstone of the curriculum, from potions projects to Quidditch teams. The message was clear. The four pillars were meant to support a single, magnificent roof, not to build separate, warring forts. This was a conscious effort to heal the schism that had haunted the castle since its earliest days, to finally fulfill the inclusive dream that Godric, Helga, and Rowena had sacrificed so much to protect. The stakes of this philosophical shift were as high as any battle. The future of Hogwarts, and by extension, the entire wizarding world, depended on it. A return to the old rivalries and suspicions would leave the school vulnerable, its foundations spiritually weak. But if this new generation could truly internalize the lesson of their shared restoration, they would create a legacy even more powerful than the original enchantments. They would prove that the founders' principles were not fragile relics, but living ideas capable of evolving, of learning from the past, and of guiding the school safely for another 1,000 years. And as the final stone was set, the castle felt more alive than ever, ready for its next chapter. 1,000 years after its founding, a first-year student from a non-magical family stood trembling on the stool in the great hall, the worn leather of the sorting hat slipping over their eyes. The hall held its breath, a sea of young faces watching this ritual play out once more. Then, after a heartbeat of silence that seemed to stretch into eternity, the hat's brim tore open and shouted a single, shocking word: Slytherin. For a moment, there was only stunned silence, the air itself thick with the weight of a millennium of history. Then, slowly, a ripple of uncertain applause began, growing in strength as the reality of the moment settled over the hall. This was no ordinary sorting. It was a quiet revolution, a single, simple act that reached across the centuries to answer the founders' most painful arguments. In that one word, the hat defied Salazar Slytherin's bitterest wish for a pure-blood citadel, fulfilling instead Godric Gryffindor's unwavering belief that a person's heart, not their parentage, was the only true measure of worth. It honored Helga Hufflepuff's deep sense of fairness, seeing the potential for loyalty and hard work in a soul others might have dismissed, and it validated Rowena Ravenclaw's wisdom, her brilliant foresight in creating a judge that could see past prejudice to the raw, brilliant potential within. The students walked to the Slytherin table, through a silence that was slowly transforming into acceptance. Was more than a simple change of seats. It was the culmination of every struggle, every late-night debate, and every tear shed over the school's soul. It proved that the true, enduring magic of Hogwarts was not just in its moving staircases or its enchanted ceiling, but in its living, breathing capacity for change and redemption. The castle itself seemed to sigh, a subtle shift in the ancient stones as the ancient wound, left by a founder's departure, finally began to close. The legacy was no longer a set of rigid rules etched in stone, but a living story, still being written by every child who passed through its doors. This living promise is not just written in the castle's ancient stones, but whispered in the very air you breathe when you walk its halls. The portraits of the four founders still hold their silent counsel in the headmaster's office, each a captured echo of a brilliant, complicated mind. Godric's painted eyes still gleam with fierce pride, while Helga's gentle smile offers a comfort that transcends the centuries. Rowena's likeness remains deep in thought, and even Salazar's stern gaze is a necessary part of the whole, a permanent reminder of the conflicts that shape their world. Their most personal treasures, the sword, the cup, the diadem, still answer the call of true character, appearing only when a student's heart perfectly mirrors the virtue the founder held most dear. And the castle itself is their greatest, breathing legacy. The staircases that shift beneath your feet are not mere trickery. They are the school's own way of thinking, a sentient magic born from 4 unique wills woven into one. What does it mean to build something that lasts 1,000 years? It means that every child who nervously boards the Hogwarts Express, every laugh shared in the Great Hall under the enchanted ceiling, and every hard-won friendship between a Gryffindor and a Slytherin is a quiet victory. Each of these moments is a fresh thread woven into the founder's original, magnificent tapestry, proving that their sanctuary for the magical, the curious, and the brave was worth every sacrifice. The story of Godric, Helga, Rowena, and Salazar is far more than a history lesson. It is a timeless whisper carried on the wind through the castle's corridors, a lesson in the incredible power that blooms when we dare to build something far greater than ourselves.
you.